In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire, was gripped by something impossible. Not war, not disease, but dance, and not the joyful kind. They danced until their bones snapped, until blood soaked their shoes, until their hearts gave out. This is the true story of the dancing plague. It began in July with a woman known only as Frau Trophäa. She stepped into the street and began to dance, alone, silently, uncontrollably. She danced for hours, then days, no music, no rest, no explanation. By the third day, people began to gather, not to watch, but to join her. 1 became 5, 5 became 30. Within a week, over 400 people were dancing in the streets of Strasbourg, and they couldn't stop. Witnesses described dancers with glassy eyes, convulsing bodies, and twisted limbs. Some cried out in pain, others begged for help. But their legs wouldn't stop moving. Some collapsed. Some died of exhaustion, strokes, or heart failure. And the most chilling part? No one knew why. Doctors were baffled. Was it supernatural? A punishment from God? Or something in the body? Their solution? They ordered more dancing. The city constructed a stage, hired musicians, encouraged the afflicted to dance it out. It only made things worse. Weeks passed. The dancing didn't stop. People dropped dead in the streets. The city reeked of sweat, blood, and fear. Eventually, authorities reversed course. The dancers were taken to a shrine, high in the mountains. There they prayed, rested, and one by one, they stopped. The plague had ended. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened. Some blame mass hysteria, a form of collective psychosis triggered by fear and stress. Others suspect ergot poisoning, a hallucinogenic mold on rye bread that can cause spasms and delirium. But neither theory fully explains it. Hundreds of people, all in one city, all dancing to death. A mystery still unsolved, and a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things aren't imagined, they're history. The Middle Ages were not just an era of knights and castles. They were an age of darkness, of fear, of pain. But even in a time known for brutality, one method of torture stood out. It was cruel. It was calculated. It involved nothing but a prisoner, a metal bucket, and a rat. This is the story of rat torture, one of the most gruesome execution methods ever used in medieval Europe. Imagine being stripped, bound, and pinned to a cold stone floor. You're accused of treason or heresy, or maybe they just want information. They bring in a small writhing creature, a starving rat. It hisses, claws, senses your fear. Next, a metal container, a cauldron, a pot, a cage. It's placed directly on your exposed abdomen. The rat is inside. The container is sealed. And then they light a fire. As the heat builds, the rat panics. It claws at the walls. It scratches. It screeches. And then it does the only thing it can. It digs downward into your skin, through your flesh, toward your organs. This wasn't just some twisted invention from a movie. Versions of rat torture were actually used throughout parts of medieval Europe and reappeared in later centuries, including in colonial Latin America and even during totalitarian regimes. It wasn't meant to kill you quickly. It was meant to terrify, to send a message, to show what desperation, hunger, and cruelty could do when combined. The exact origins of rat torture are hard to trace. Like most acts of extreme cruelty, it wasn't proudly recorded, but mentions of it appear in early European inquisitions, as well as in Dutch records during the 17th century. One of the most infamous uses came under Damião de Veiga, a Portuguese governor in South America, who was said to use rats in metal cages to extract confessions from indigenous leaders. And in more modern times, the technique was referenced during the Reign of Terror in Chile under Pinochet, and even fictionalized in George Orwell's 1984, because the very idea of it is enough to break anyone. Rats weren't just chosen at random. They were perfect instruments of fear, fast, intelligent, voracious, capable of chewing through walls, wood, metal, and yes, flesh. They evoke disgust and primal fear in most people. But when starved, when cornered, a rat will do anything to survive, including eating its way through you. In medieval Europe, torture wasn't hidden. It was law. Pain was seen as a divine purifier, a way to force truth from the wicked. Methods were invented not just to punish, but to break the soul. Rat torture was rare, but that's what made it so powerful. It was used when fear needed to be absolute, when silence was no longer an option. To witnesses, the lesson was clear. If you defied the crown, if you defied the church, if you defied power itself, the rats would come for you, and you would be nothing more than a tunnel for something hungry and blind. We like to think we've evolved since the Middle Ages, but history tells a different story. Because the tools may change, the cages might look different, but the cruelty, that's always been human. Some killers stalk their victims in shadows. Some leave trails of blood that chill the bones. But Richard Chase, he didn't just kill, he consumed, federal, drank. He believed blood was the only thing keeping him alive. In the winter of 1977, Sacramento was gripped by a terror it had never seen before. No motive, no clear pattern, just death, and something far worse left behind. This is the story of Richard Chase, the man the world would come to know as the Vampire of Sacramento. Long before the murders, there were warnings. Richard Trenton Chase was born on May 23, 1950, in a quiet California suburb, but his childhood was anything but normal. He showed all three signs of the McDonald triad: bedwetting, fire starting, and animal cruelty. As a teenager, he became obsessed with killing animals and drinking their blood. Doctors said he was schizophrenic. He said he was melting, that his bones were turning to dust, that someone had stolen his pulmonary artery. He would blend animal organs in a blender and drink them, believing it was medicine. But no one saw what was coming next. In 1976, he was involuntarily institutionalized after injecting rabbit blood into his veins. He became known as Dracula at the facility after being caught drinking the blood of birds. Doctors released him, believing he was no longer a danger to society. He moved into a small apartment, alone. His neighbors complained of the stench of dead animals and the sight of him walking around completely naked. But nothing was done. Heartbeat sound begins softly. Then in December of 1977, Richard Chase bought a .22 caliber handgun, and Sacramento's nightmare began. December 29th, 1977, Ambrose Griffin, a 51-year-old engineer, was helping his wife unload groceries when he collapsed onto the sidewalk, dead. He'd been shot in the chest, randomly, by a passing car. No one knew it was the first strike from Chase. Just 2 days later, he attempted to enter a woman's home. but her door was locked. He walked away. You see, Chase believed that an unlocked door was an invitation. If it was locked, he took it as a sign he wasn't welcome. This rule would spare some and doom others. January 23rd, 1978. Teresa Wallin was 3 months pregnant. Her husband was at work. She was alone. Chase entered her home through an unlocked door. He shot her 3 times, then performed unspeakable acts. He dragged her body into a bedroom, mutilated it with a butcher knife, and drank her blood from a yogurt container. He used her body as a canvas and a vessel. Before he left, he gathered dog feces from the yard and stuffed it into her mouth. He wasn't just killing, he was desecrating, dehumanizing, feeding a delusion. 4 days later, Chase struck again, and this time, it was an outright massacre. January 27th, 1978. Evelyn Meroth, 38, was babysitting her 22-month-old nephew, David. Her 6-year-old son, Jason, was playing nearby. A neighbor, Dan Meredith, had come to check on her. Chase entered through the back door. In a matter of minutes, he shot and killed all 4. Then, in complete silence, he performed acts so grotesque that even seasoned detectives would later vomit at the crime scene. He mutilated Evelyn's body. He drank her blood. He cannibalized parts of David. He placed the baby's remains in the trash, like refuse. When police arrived, it wasn't a home. It was a slaughterhouse. Fingerprints, footprints. A neighbor saw him flee. The police moved fast. Within days, Chase was arrested at his apartment. Inside, investigators found bloody blenders, animal parts in the fridge, and walls stained with human blood. He told detectives he had to drink blood to survive, that Nazis were poisoning him, that UFOs were watching, that his heart was shrinking. It was no longer a question of guilt. It was a question of sanity. In 1979, Richard Chase stood trial for 6 counts of murder. The defense pleaded insanity. The prosecution argued method, intent, and choice. The jury agreed he was guilty and sane. He was sentenced to death by gas chamber. But the Vampire of Sacramento would never meet the gas chamber. On December 26, 1980, he was found in his cell, dead. Suicide. He'd overdosed on antidepressants he'd saved up over weeks. His final act of control was taking his own life. Richard Chase didn't kill for money or revenge or even pleasure. He killed because he believed blood was the only thing keeping him alive. And for 6 victims, including a baby, that belief turned into horror. He entered through unlocked doors, uninvited, a man who thought he was dying, and made sure others died first. This was no vampire of legend. This was a man, a broken, twisted man, and his story is one of the darkest ever recorded in American crime.